How Maui Found His Father and the Magic Jawbone by Peter Gossage. Maui was happy. He had found his mother, Taranga, but two things bothered him. Who was his father? And where did his mother go during the day? One night he covered the window and door of their whare with cloaks and mats to block out the early morning light. Taranga overslept, and Maui saw her hurry out into the sunrise. Down the hill from the path she raced. Maui, following behind, saw her leap into a hole and disappeared from sight. He peered into the hole. He dropped sticks and stones, but he could not hear them land. If my mother can do it, so can I, thought Maui, and he sprang after her. As he fell, he chanted the karakia to turn himself into Rupe, the wood pigeon. With a flutter of his wings, he flopped into a pile of bracken at the bottom of the hole. He crept along the tunnel that led from the hole until it opened onto a vast underground land. Beneath the tree, he could see his mother and a man. Could this man be his father? Maui fluttered into the branches of the puriri tree. He plucked a berry and dropped it on the man. The man looked up, and Maui dropped another. The man jumped up in anger. He called to the other people of the underworld, and they began to throw stones at the cheeky pigeon. Maui skillfully dodged the people's stones, but when the man flung one, he let it hit him on his feathered chest. He pitched from the tree and flopped at the man's feet. As the man bent to pick him up, Maui sprang to his feet in his human form. Then they knew they were father and son. Maui's father, whose name was Makia Tutara, took his son to a sacred waterfall and bathed him in its waters. He chanted karakia to give Maui more magical powers and everlasting life. Maui was happy. He had found his father, but Makia Tutara was sad. He had made a mistake when chanting the karakia, magical incantations, over Maui. It was only a little slip, but he knew it would one day cost Maui his life. Maui's grandfather, Muri Rangi Whenua, lived in the underworld too, and each day Maui would bring him some food. One day he hid it, and his grandfather asked, "Where is my kai, Maui?" "Give me a magic jawbone and I will give you your kai," said Maui. "No," said his grandfather. So every day Maui would hide the food and ask him again. At last Muri Rangi Whenua became too hungry and gave in. He slipped his magic jawbone from his mouth and gave it to Maui. "Tame the sun with this bone, Maui. Find the secret of fire and fish up a land. But do not defy Hine, the goddess of death, or you will surely die," he said. Maui felt the power of the bone course through him. "I will tame the sun. I will find the secret of fire. I will even defy death." And when he turned from the underworld to the land above, he did. But that is another story. The end. The Fish of Maui by Peter Gossage. Maui had magical powers and was much better at everything than his four foster brothers, Roto, Mua, Pai, and Taha. They planned to go fishing the next day, but had not told Maui, as that they were jealous and did not want him to come. Early next morning, Maui hid himself in the bottom of his brother's canoe. His brothers laughed as they set off, little knowing that Maui Nukaro, the trickster, was going with them. They paddled out beyond the breakers until they found a good place to fish. But it was not good enough for Maui Atamai, the quick-witted. He sprang from his hiding place in the bottom of the canoe. The brothers, still shocked by Maui's magical appearance, obeyed his order to paddle on. On and on they paddled. They begged Maui to stop, but he would not. As the sun began to set, the land was already out of sight. All that night Maui paddled by the light of Marama the moon. One by one his brothers fell asleep. The sea mile slipped beneath the keel of the canoe as something drove Maui on and on. Morning found the brothers grumpy and surly. Maui was at last satisfied with the fishing place, but as Utu, revenge, his brothers would give him no bait. So he struck himself on the nose and smeared the magic jawbone with his own blood. Around and around his head whirled the jawbone of his ancestor. Out and up it crept in a widening spiral, like a great carving in the air. Then he flung it free to plummet like Takawau, the shag, into the ocean. The line plunged through the depths with the speed of a taiaha. The bone struck wood and locked in the arm of a carving. Maui, on the other hand, on the other end of the line, did not know that his hook was snared on the tiko of a whare, rooted deep in the back of a giant being. He was not landing a fish, but fishing a land. He tugged, he wrenched, he heaved, he strained with every muscle in his body. At the bottom of the ocean, something began to stir. Above, Maui chanted karakia that passed down the line and into the grey fish. They called on it to rise up, to become light and float to the surface, but it knew the sea was its home, and it began to fight. Maui braced himself as the sea began to churn and boil. Planting his feet firmly astride the canoe, he started to pull in the line. His terrified brothers made no move to help him, and they clung to the bucking craft. The fish thrashed in fury, but his strength was not as strong as Maui's will. Power coursed through Maui, and the grey fish ballooned to the surface. And what a fish it was! His tail stretched away to the north, and his head lay far in the south. I must get my hook. Do not touch him while I am gone. He is smooth and flat, and I do not want him damaged, said Maui. But the moment Maui was out of sight, his brothers began to hack out of their share. For, after all, hadn't they helped with the paddling? The great fish writhed in agony as the paddle blades sliced into his flesh. In no time, his once smooth back was a jagged mass of valleys and ranges. The fish of Maui was now a rugged land. You may have visited Te Ika a Maui, or even be living on his back at this very moment, for he is the North Island of New Zealand. Doesn't it look like a rather battered stingray to you? The end.